So now let's talk about the agile style of project management. So we've talked about the waterfall style of project management, where basically you completely plan out what the project is, you get the sign off from whoever you need the sign off from, you go, you build it, and you may not see the customer again until basically you're almost finished with the project. Well, the issue is, especially in the startup world, in this modern world where there's this idea of we should be building as quickly as possible, deploying to the end user as quickly as possible, and then getting feedback from the user so that we can figure out what we should focus on and what we should ignore. The waterfall project management style basically kind of falls flat. It takes a long time, it's very resource intensive, it's very documentation intensive, and it's just very clunky. That's why they came up with the agile project management style. And so basically what the agile project management style is that you're on a constant delivery schedule. So instead of building a complete project and then handing that over to the customer, the idea is, okay, I'm going to build, again, kind of like the MVP, I'm going to build the minimum that I need to have something, anything that I can deliver. Right? And then I'm going to deliver that. And then the customer is going to use that small amount of functionality, and they're going to start giving you feedback at that point. The font size is too small. Some of the people in my company are colorblind, and so the colors you're using, they can't tell what those colors actually are. Oh, we use Android, but the Android we use is the Amazon Android, and therefore when you try to display this, you have to use a special SDK or something like that. The idea is you hand over the minimum, right, to the customer, to the end user. They tell you their feelings about that, and then you take that back and then you work on it some more. And literally, with some of the agile projects that are out there, there literally might be 11 deliveries per day or 11 pushes per day. Where basically they make a change and they push it out, and they see what the hell people say. And then they make another change and they push it out and see what people say. They literally might do that like 11 times a day. Changing fonts, changing colors, changing a little bit of the flow, trying to figure out what people want the most. This is an important thing to be considering, especially if you're going to do a startup, right? So if you are building the project for you or for your company or startup, and you're not building it for somebody else, an important thing to understand is many times you really don't understand the customer. And many times the customer doesn't understand the customer, right? The customer will tell you. The customer tells you, what is really important to me is, and then you'll build that, and then they won't care. They won't use it. And then there's other stuff where the customer will be like, oh, I don't care about that. That is absolutely worthless to me. And then you build something, and it doesn't have that in there. And then they start screaming because this thing that they said was worthless actually is really important to them. Or you can have other things where you build something and people just didn't quite realize what it is you're building. They hadn't really thought it through. And so once they get it into their hands, once they start playing with it, they start understanding it better and start realizing what they would really like this thing to do. Oh, what you've created, that's nice. But what would make this really valuable is if you did X, Y, or Z. And so with the agile style and this constant deployment, the cool thing is basically, whenever you're doing your cycles, you can take all that input in, you can make small or larger changes, you can push that back out to the users, and you can see how well that works. The cool thing now is with web apps or with software as a service, it makes things like agile project management much easier. So back when I had my business and we were deploying surveillance systems and telephone systems and that type of deal, an agile project management style would not have been a good way to go, right? I don't want to buy a $2,000 server, install a $2,000 server, and then have the customer go, oh, I don't really want this server, but this other server over here would have been useful. Like, that's not what you want. Like, oh, I like the idea of this camera, but could we try a different camera, right? Because it's physical objects. I'm paying hundreds or thousands of dollars for this hardware, plus it had to get shipped to me and the rest of it. I don't want people futzing with that plan while I'm in the middle of it. Or with software as it used to be, where everything is installed on a machine. So if you have a Windows machine or a Mac and the software is installed on the machine, every time the developer would create an update, you'd actually have to install the update onto the machine. Imagine for your customers, for a secretary or such, if they had to update a piece of software 11 times in a day. That would just not fly, right? So the cool thing with software as a service, right? The software actually resides on your web server. People are simply going to your software through a web browser, Firefox, Internet Explorer, whatever, Safari, right? So basically you can modify your web app, again, 11 times a day. Every time they go to the web app, it is now updated with whatever the latest version is. And so that's one of the reasons why Agile project management is more useful in the modern world than it would have been about 10 or 15 years ago. One of the things to think about with this style is, especially as you're initially building out, you should be thinking about how you want to deliver the software to the end user. Even if the final plan is an iOS app or an Android app or something that you install on the machine, one of the things that I would argue is in the MVP process is to build a web app. So even if you plan at the end of the day for the app to be physically installed on the machine, the thing is, again, as soon as it's installed on the machine, if you do updates, you have to keep updating it, right? The cool thing, again, with that web app, when they go, they get whatever the current version is. So one of the things that you might do is for the initial versions of your app, simply make it a web app. Don't make it iOS, don't make it Android, don't make it Mac or Windows. Make it the web app. Get people to actually use it and get that feedback before we start worrying about creating native apps. The other thing that's nice about this whole Agile project management system is you also get to start pulling in metrics. So a very important thing is when you build your solution, make sure you have a metrics system that will tell you information about the users, right? So this should be things like IP addresses. So you can pull an IP address, especially if it's a web app, you can pull the IP address and you can actually get geographic information. So you can see what country this person is in. You can see what city this person is in, that type of deal. You can also see things like what operating system. So an important thing to consider, right, especially if you're a startup, is you're only going to get so much initial funding, like in the angel round, right? Or, somebody just hands you money, right? You get $100,000, you get $200,000, maybe you get $1 million. And let me tell you, $1 million sounds big until you start building tech projects. Then you realize how small it is, right? Well, here's the thing, right? To build a native iOS app might cost you a couple $100,000. To build an Android iOS app may cost a couple $100,000. Again, the same is true with Mac or Windows or that type of deal. Until you validated what your customers actually want and who your customers actually are, if you start building these native applications before you verified you actually have users on these platforms, you might literally be wasting money. You might find out that 1% of your users use iOS and 88% of your users use Android, right? If you've only got so much money, there's only so much money you have, I would argue then you focus on the Android people and wait on the iOS people. Or you might find 88% are the iOS people, 1% are the Android people. And that's the thing is with the Agile project management style, you're building, you're iterating, you're getting this feedback constantly so that you can then focus on what is most valuable for you, your organization, and for your project. The downside with Agile project management is the whole question of when does the customer stop paying you? So I have seen this in the real world. And it's kind of painful, dare I say cringy, with some of the developer company CEOs I've dealt with, where they have laughed when their customer literally said, when do we stop paying you? Because in this Agile project management system, you're constantly iterating. right? In waterfall, you create a project, you finish a project, you get the money. Now, there may be maintenance, ongoing maintenance required, right? That's kind of a normal thing. But basically, I give you $250,000 for the project, and then, okay, I expect to spend a couple $1,000s a year on maintenance. I get that. The problem is with Agile project management, many times when things are being developed in this style, there is no end. Right? The customer is burning through $20,000 a month now. They get to where they think the end is, and then the development company is like, okay, well, you can cut it back to $10,000 a month. And you might have the customer like, what, but wait a minute. No, but we had you build the project. So we get to the end and we go to, I don't know, $100 or $500 or $1,000 a month, something like that. We weren't expecting to keep spending $10,000 a month on this whole thing. And it's like, well, but that's how we design. We designed this for constant iteration. And that's one of the drawbacks with the Agile style, is the whole idea that there never really is an end. The development company never really ever stops charging you for services, which, depending on the company and depending on basically what is being created, may or may not matter. But that is something that you do have to consider, is basically at what point can the customer basically stop? Do you have a place where the customer can basically stop? Or, are you planning to keep getting paid, from this project essentially until you retire? That is something that you do have to be concerned about. The other thing with Agile project management, the problem that you can have is basically feature creep. So whenever we talk about creep, it's where we have an idea, we have a plan, and then we just start adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. The nice part about the waterfall project management style is every time you want me to do any additional work, we have to go through a change order procedure, which is create new documentation, figure out how much the change will cost, get the check off. Right? So anytime you want a modification, not only do you have to pay more, or the customer pay more, but you also have to go through this tedious process. The nice part about that is that keeps people from adding too much crap to your project. Right? The issue with the Agile style is, since you're constantly seeking feedback and you're constantly iterating, a big question comes up is, what features do you add? And more importantly, what features do you not add? What happens if, customers or somebody comes to you and says, you really should have this feature in the product? What is your process, not for saying yes, rather for saying no, so you just don't get this tentacle of an octopus of a project that truly has no end and is trying to do absolutely everything in the world. And that's another downside to the Agile project management style, and something to think about. So with Agile, there's a whole you can get books. There are whole books out there to explain to you all the processes and all the steps in Agile. Again, we may talk about that in a different class. I just wanted to give you a basic overview of the Agile style, just so you have an idea of what people are talking about if it comes up.